Hello, everyone. For those who haven't met me yet, my name's Tyler. I'm one of the newer long-term care life and annuity folks over here at Insurance Advisors Direct. As discussed and displayed in the email invite to all of you here, and some of you have talked on the phone, I'm bringing on Lawrence today from National Guardian Life out of Nashville, and he's going to go over just kind of a general, a broader scope of long-term care and talking about it with prospects and clients. Primarily, it's going to be Lawrence leading the charge here with this webinar. We're going to all learn a lot together. For questions, please, if you have questions, feel free to write them down and hold off on them until the end, and I will give people the opportunity at the end to ask some questions. And, if we can't get to everybody's questions or there's something you think about later, you know where to call and we can get that answered for you. But with that, I'll hand this off to Lawrence. And Lawrence, if you don't mind just kind of introducing yourself a little bit, and then we can get started here.
Yeah, Tyler, thanks. I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for taking some time this morning to learn a little bit more about, normally I say NGL in our products, but today I want to say about having the long-term care conversation. And I want to try and really focus today on not being product specific and giving you some talking points on how to initiate the conversation, how to open up the conversation, and a couple of simple next steps for you to be able to effectively not only make the transition, but create interest and set the context for the conversation, and then assess health and make that transition to the sale and designing a plan and talking about products and things of that nature. Because I really feel like the conversation has to precede everything else. So let's talk a little bit about a couple of ways we can initiate the conversation. And folks, it can be a lot easier than you think. Could just be very simple, casual conversation. And we just came out of the holiday season, right? And when families see each other for the first time at a larger scale, perhaps that for that whole year where many of them gather all in one place, there are some great ways you can initiate that conversation. Or even if you're talking to your neighbors, right, or other friends, right, even simple things. You have sales right in front of you. How's the family? And let them talk. If they don't transition to that next piece of how their parents are, maybe they talk about their kids, open up that conversation. Or just talk about, oh, man, the construction in the area. And I have one of these going in my area, in my county. Man, have you seen that building that looks like a country club that they're putting up? Actually, it's an assisted living facility, but the place is beautiful. And having gone to many of these facilities from different avenues of my career involving long-term care and long-term care planning, some of these places really do look and feel like country clubs. They're beautiful. You don't want to leave, right? Great ways to open that conversation, right? Do you know much about assisted living, right? Do you have any family members who have needed this kind of help, or loved ones or friends, right? And let them talk. Let them tell you what their story is, what their context is around the conversation. And you'll see as we get into that chart acronym that Tyler marketed for our conversation today, that's the C in the chart, context. So we have to get that context. So how's the family? Have you seen the construction in the area? Are you getting together with your parents or your in-laws for the holidays? How are they? How have they been? And maybe they'll say, oh, yes, my mother-in-law is getting older. We've noticed some dementia, and my grandfather even, it could be, right? Ways to open up the conversation. So here's your key points. You're steering the conversations towards talking about care situations or settings in which someone needs a little bit of help, right? And I prepared this deck recently for another conversation saying, hey, the holidays are coming up. And I left this on there because fun facts most people don't know. The number one day for new claims, and I heard this from one of the carriers in the industry with historically one of the largest blocks of long-term care business. The number one day for new claims is the Monday after Thanksgiving. Why? Families are getting together for the first time in a larger scale than they have all year, kind of where we started this conversation, right? And they're seeing, oh Uncle Jeff is having, these issues we didn't notice, or Aunt Sue is acting a little funny, or Mom is saying these things that just aren't adding up, right? So that's why that's the number one day for newly filed claims in the industry, believe it or not. So let's go a little more specific. Many of you being Medicare specialists, and having worked with many Medicare specialists over the years, I think I've got a couple of ways where we can steer the conversation towards a long-term care sale and give you a couple of tips on this opening conversation, this initiation point, where I've seen some producers have some great success. And that's to position yourself the right way, okay? And I've seen many people just say, hey, we just took care of your Med Sup or got you on your Med Advantage plan. Do you want to talk about long-term care? No. That's an easy no, right? That's not the way to make that transition. The best way to make that transition is up front when you start working with the client and you position yourself as an expert in helping them plan for health care in their retirement. Make the point that those are the two, that is what you do. You're not asking, do you want to talk about long-term care? You're positioning yourself as an expert in helping them plan for health care in their retirement. And to do that, we need to talk about two major items. You came to me for a Medicare plan, and yes, we'll absolutely take care of that. But by the way, Medicare does not pay for long-term care, if at all, for very long. Maximum, it'll be 100 days. And that's written in the law. That's just how Medicare works. So if I'm an expert in helping you plan for health care in your retirement, I need to talk to you about both of these avenues. Otherwise, I'm not doing my job, right? And that's when the clients go, okay, yeah, let's continue to have this conversation. You're not asking them a yes or no question. You're positioning yourself as that expert, and you're telling them what you need to do to properly help them and advise them. So the key point is don't ask if they want to talk about long-term care. Tell them what you do and how you do it. That's the big key point. The second key point is a great transition if you're doing a Med Advantage plan versus a Med Sup, because in most situations with Med Advantage, you have a zero premium. So what you've done is you've taken someone who has a Medicare supplement and you freed up dollars, right? Say it's a couple $100 a month or whatever it might be. That's just a number I'm pulling out of the air. Well, you now have funds that you found that you can transition to the long-term care side of your conversation. You just found $200 a month where you can talk about long-term care premiums, whatever it might be, right? Whatever that number might be. So the biggest key point is don't ask them if they want to talk about long-term care. On the upfront, tell them what you do and how you do it. And don't forget, if you're doing a Med Advantage plan, you have freed up dollars that you can now take and transition into the long-term care side of the conversation. Okay. I do also want to talk a little bit, because I know many of you do work in life insurance as well, about the life to long-term care transition. Here's the thing. You're protecting the same people. It's a different event. So when you're talking to someone about a life insurance plan, you're planning for mitigating the consequences for your loved ones caused by your death. Because there's going to be financial, emotional, and physical consequences, right, when you pass away, especially if it's unexpected or at a younger age. So you're planning for mitigating those consequences. Well, think about this. What if you didn't die? What would the consequences be if something happens when you're still alive? Same people, same impact financially, emotionally, and physically. And actually, with a long-term care event, the emotional and physical is probably more significant, because you're talking about somebody who can't bathe or dress or get around the house. What would that toll be like on your loved ones? Who is going to provide that help? Who is going to do what when if I can't move from bed to chair tomorrow morning? Can you think of anyone who's gone through this? How is it affecting their family? Who's had to move or change jobs? What has the change been on their lifestyle, right? So that's one of the key points here when you make that transition. Long-term care insurance is lifestyle insurance, not just for you if you need help, but for everybody around you. So you need to make the connection that these two events are equally as impactful. They're two different events with very similar consequences to the same people. You have your life insurance and you have your lifestyle insurance. Okay. So conversation openers. I wanted to give you some of those transition points, some of those talking points, just to have the conversation. Okay. Now let's talk about the CHART acronym, and we're going to spend most of our time on the C, on the context part of this. Okay. So context is crucially important. You need to identify what your client's perceptions or even misconceptions might be about long-term care and take detailed notes. Understand where they're coming from. Understand what they think about the topic. Understand what is shaping why they do or don't want to have this conversation with you. Because with those notes, you can go back and address each one of those points one by one as you're establishing the value of a plan. Okay? Because effectively setting the context is going to do one of three things. It's either going to pave the way for you to make a sale. You're either going to completely weed them out and determine this person's not a prospect. They're either not financially, it's not financially appropriate for them, or they might not be ready to make a decision on this emotionally, or they just don't believe it will ever happen to them. And we're going to address a lot of that as we go through the context part of this. Or you're going to discover that there's something preventing them from being able to get a plan, whether that's their health. We're going to talk a lot about health. That's the H in our acronym here today. It could be not financially appropriate for them, or they could have some deeply held misconceptions about what this stuff is and how it works. That's why we need to take detailed notes and determine which one of these three avenues the conversation is going to end with. Okay. So, questions to ask. How do you make this next step of the conversation a success? What's prompting your interest in this? Why are we talking about this today? And as you made some of your transition points earlier, maybe they didn't. Maybe you are what prompted the interest. But it's really important that you ask some of these other questions, right? When you hear the words long-term care, what images do you see? What do you think about? Have you had any personal experience with this? Do you know someone who's needed this kind of help? Tell me more about that. What is your plan if your health changes? Now, it's crucially important that we get to, and we'll talk more about this in a couple minutes, the point where it's not, hey, you will need this kind of help, and here's all the stats, here's all the numbers, and we're going to talk about that. It's not, you're going to need this, because most people are never going to need it in their own minds, right? Statistically, they probably will. But in our minds, I'm never going to need this kind of help. I never even want to think about that. Great. I agree with you. You're never going to need it. But if you did, back to the initial conversation, what would the consequences be financially, emotionally, and physically to all those around you who are going to provide you with this kind of help if you needed it? That makes it a little less scary for people. Okay? I agree with you. You're never going to need it. But if you did, what would happen? So what would your plan be if something changed tomorrow? Okay. So generally at this point, people are thinking, well, this is old folks in a nursing home. You ever thought about these people on the screen? None of these people were old, right? Things happen. Life happens. What about these people? All these people that we recognize as icons in what they do, who needed some kind of help when it comes to a long-term care scenario, or who have diagnoses where they're more likely to need some kind of help in their later years. So let's talk about some numbers real quick. Here's the myth, right? People think old folks in a nursing home. Well, the reality, and these numbers on the screen are from a 5-year block of claims from a carrier that has one of the largest claims blocks in the industry, and they released this study. 91% of claims started outside of a nursing home, and 85% of them ended there. So people have these deeply held misconceptions. They think about this just being nursing home insurance. On the top of the slide, this is nursing home insurance for old people. Reality is, most people who need this kind of help and use their policy never end up in a nursing home. Single digits, folks, initiate their claim there. The reality is, this is anybody at any time kind of help. And most people are receiving care in the home, and more of them are going to these country club assisted living facilities. Folks, life happens. It could be an unexpected diagnosis, an accident, an injury, something at the gym, a car wreck. Anybody at any time kind of help. So the reality is, this is not just old folks. This is not just nursing homes. And the way I would position this when I was selling this stuff to clients is, hey, if you plan to live a long, healthy life, chances are at some point you might need some help with some simple daily living activities, such as bathing, dressing, or getting around the house. Because what is long-term care? By definition, what is it? Well, it's when you need help with simple daily living activities. And medically speaking, we have 6 of these things called activities of daily living, or ADLs: eating, bathing, dressing, toileting, continence, and transferring. And the way you initiate a claim, actually, is when your doctor certifies you need help with at least 2 of those things for at least 90 days. Or you need constant supervision due to a cognitive impairment. This is anybody at any time kind of stuff. Look at the people that were on the screen a couple of minutes ago. Right? Things can happen. Life happens to all of us. Now, this is what long-term care is. And that's a great way, by the way, to initiate some of the conversation and understand some of their context. Right? What does long-term care mean to you? What does it mean? And most people might tell me when it might be, where it might be. They can't tell me what it is. They don't know exactly what it is. Oh, that'll be when I'm older. That'll be if I need a nursing home. Okay, you told me when and where, but what is it? And it's what's on the screen right now, what we just discussed. So that's what the care is. Now, what is long-term care insurance? Because a lot of people will also say, oh, that's an insurance plan. Well, no. What's the care? What's the help first? Let's make sure we understand that. Long-term care insurance is just the vehicle that funds the costs associated with needing that kind of help. And it's a comprehensive policy, so it can cover home care, assisted living, could be private nursing home care. Again, as we saw, most people never end up there. Could be adult daycare as well, but most people receive this kind of help in their home. So you need to establish that context. And there's one other piece of context, and that's getting into what does and doesn't cover it and what this stuff costs. So when I say, hey, cost of care, let's look together. I want to talk a little bit about a tool that I think you'll all find quite helpful. It's a cost of care calculator. And quite honestly, there's a carrier out there who I still think they're not currently selling long-term care insurance, but they have a great cost of care calculator. And as you saw, I just Googled Gemworth cost of care. And you've got your U.S. map. I happen to be in Tennessee, so I'm going to click on Tennessee, and I'll just click on the Nashville area, and we have honed in on my local cost of care here in Nashville. Okay, this study, they last updated in 21, so let's go to 2024, assuming a 3% inflation rate on the cost from 21, which is probably about fair. So home health aid, we can flip to hourly. You're looking at about $30 an hour, which depending on the area around here is pretty accurate. You're around $30, $35 an hour. Assisted living, entry level, about $4,500 a month, probably about accurate. You want the country club, you're probably looking closer to $6,000. Private nursing home, around $9,000 a month. That's pretty accurate for my area, right? So this is a great calculator where you can interactively look at not just where someone lives today, but where they plan to retire, and look at that local cost of care and see what you can do to customize this context part of the conversation with them, okay? Now, again, most people never end up here. So what I would focus on with people is looking at that hourly cost, which in my area, I know factually just from being here, it's around $30, $35 an hour. And that monthly country club assisted living, which is going to be more than the entry level, right? It's going to be about $6,000 a month here, which is the cost of about 8 hours of home care a day. 6 to 8 in most areas will be equivalent to the nice assisted living. So that's what I would establish with folks, I wouldn't focus so much on this number because you have to create a plan so large there. And I would say, look, you saw the stats. Most people are going to receive care in their home or in an assisted living facility, right? So let's create a plan that can look at those costs. If you end up here, which again, most people don't, you'll have more out-of-pocket expenses, but you have a plan that will cover a huge majority of this if we get into this 6,000 area for the country club or for that 8 hours of home care a day. Okay. So that's how I would look at that cost of care. Use those interactive calculators, customize it in the area they plan to retire, and have them develop that together with you. One last bit you have to do on context is get into what doesn't pay for this. They need to understand that your health insurance, if you look in the contract, generally has an exclusion for custodial care, which is non-skilled care, right? Help with bathing, dressing, getting around the house. Medicare will only pay for 100 days maximum for recovery care in a skilled nursing facility to try and get you better. MedSup, MedAdvantage support what Medicare does, right? The point here, these plans on the screen were designed to provide skilled care to get you better. With long-term care events, you generally don't need skilled care. You're not going to go to the emergency room because you need help putting your shirt on in the morning, right? You don't need a doctor for that. You need help with non-skilled care. Bathing, dressing, getting around the house. And as we just established, this type of help is expensive. Okay? Now, what will pay for it is Medicaid, which in Tennessee is TennCare, we call it, or Medi-Cal in California. But every state has a Medicaid program, but that's designed for those who don't have assets, right? It was designed for those who don't have finances, right? It's a government-provided help, right? Medicaid is not an entitlement. It's generally a loan. So if you have finances upon your death or the death of the second spouse in the couple, many states strictly enforce their estate recovery or asset recovery, depending on the state, what they call it, laws. Okay? So to qualify for Medicaid, you can only have $2,000 in countable assets as the sick person. So for many of your clients, likely not a viable option. Most of your income is going to go to the cost of your care as well. So that's why we need to kind of summarize here and say, hey, there's very likely to happen. Most of us are going to need this kind of help. Odds are greater than a coin flip that any one of us will need this kind of help at some point in our lives. Okay? And if you plan to live a long, healthy life, chances are you'll need a little bit of help. So this isn't the doom and gloom of crazy old folks in a nursing home. This is if you plan to live a long, healthy life, you might need a little bit of help at some point. And that type of help is expensive, and it's not covered by your health insurance or Medicare. The consequences to your family, if you need this kind of help, financially, emotionally, and physically, could be significant. That's why we're having this conversation today. Now, you transition to the H part. And boy, I could focus for an entire hour just on the H part of this conversation. But we'll just take a little bit of time to talk about introducing the fact that health underwriting from a morbidity perspective is a significant part of this process. And Mr. Client, I need to know anything about your medical history. Full disclosure is key here because they're quite honestly going to know your medical records better than you do by the time this is all said and done. Because they will pull your medical records and they go through them with a fine-tooth comb. And I have seen many clients discover things in their records that they didn't know were there once they've been through the underwriting process. So, as I said, I can spend an hour on health pre-qualification alone, but some questions to ask are on your screen. Generally, I learned the most digging into someone's prescription medications with them, which I believe is the fourth bullet down in this list here. Because that told me, even if they didn't know what their diagnoses were, why they were taking those medications, right? So they gave me the list of meds, and that told me what questions to ask. So if they told me, hey, yeah, I take simvastatin, but I don't know what it's for, I have this list of medications, well, I knew that was for high cholesterol, and I knew what other things to ask. Or they're telling me they're taking Janumet, or they're taking metformin, I know they're diabetic. So I know to ask about diabetic complications. I know to ask about comorbids that underwriters look at for diabetes. I know to ask if they're a smoker, respiratory, cardiac, circulatory. Do you have any diabetic complications like retinopathy? Are the medications affecting your kidney or liver results on your labs? I know to go down all those roads. You might not know that yet, and that's okay. You can build that and get you there. But the meds were kind of my door into what's really going on. Million and one questions you can ask. Don't feel like you need to be a pre-qualification expert. We have tools for you. We have underwriters available to chat with you and know which roads to go down, but some questions to ask. So here's kind of one of the key points on health. We can take a lot of time and dig into this, but know that underwriting is a significant part of this process. Okay. A is awareness. Why are they aware of this? If there's no direct experience, go back to those notes I told you to take when we were on the C in context, and then you can address things and create awareness. But what is their awareness around this? Do they have a direct experience? Because if they do, if they already took care of somebody, they're going to be very, very open to talking to you. So the number one thing we would hear from people who are caregivers is, I never want my kids to have to go through this. I never want my kids to have to do what I did. My scenario, my mother took care of my grandmother. She lived with us for about 5 years. It was when I was in college. And I watched my mom do a lot of these things that I know she doesn't want my sister and I doing for her. So, what is their awareness? Because if there's still any misconceptions at this phase of the conversation that you haven't addressed, it's going to lead to the client saying something along the lines of, I need to think about this. I really appreciate the information, but I'm really not sure about this thing just yet. So, some of these common misconceptions, and we have to address them. This isn't going to happen to me. We already addressed this is for old sick folks, right? This isn't for me, or we can self-fund. Let's talk about some of these things. This probably isn't going to happen to me. Well, I agree, Joey. This isn't going to happen to you. But if it did, what would the consequences be to you and your family? What's making you feel like this is never going to happen to you? And then fill in the parenthetical statement at the bottom of the slide. What makes you feel this way if you just, told me about your mom or your dad needing this kind of help? I like to focus on the first one, right? I like to agree with them. I agree this is never going to happen to you. I mean, we looked at the numbers, and any one of us has a greater than 50% chance of needing this kind of help at some point if you live a long, healthy life, which you do. But if it did, what would the consequences be, emotionally, financially, and physically, to your loved ones? Is it going to happen to me? Too healthy? Well, this kind of transitions to the next one, too. Let's talk about the next one. I'm too young for this kind of help. Well, what makes you feel that way? That's really interesting. Why do you say that? Well, because I'm young and I'm healthy. Well, guess what? At your current age, this thing will never be less expensive than it is today. And your health is probably never going to be better than it is today. As we age, generally, we have more things going on with our health. And this is a health underwritten product. Only good health can buy you long-term care insurance. I know people in their 20s who can never qualify this for the rest of their life because of a certain diagnosis. You're never too young for this. People always ask me, I'd have consumers ask me, what's the right age to buy a long-term care plan? Well, it's when your health allows you to buy it and it's affordable. I can't tell you what age that is for you. Everybody's different. And the healthy folks are the ones that are going to live a long, healthy life and need this kind of help in their later years. And here's where the A transitions into the R. Well, we have the money for this. We're just going to self-fund our long-term care plan. And here's a response I saw a lot of advisors have success with and worked for me when I was in the field too. Well, what if I could help you self-fund or self-insure better and longer than you could do it on your own? I can help you achieve that goal. I can help you do exactly what you want to do, but I can help you do it better and longer than you do it on your own. That's when you go back to establishing that understanding around the cost of care. And how long could you afford, in today's numbers, $6,000 a month, before that has significant consequences on your lifestyle and the lifestyle of your loved ones? By the way, that cost tripled in the last 20 years. What if in 20 years that cost is $15,000 to $20,000 a month? How long could you afford to do that before that has a significant consequence on your retirement plan and your lifestyle and that of your loved ones? And here's the other way to address self-funding, right? Self-funding versus looking at a plan. Here's where I'm going to get a little product specific for a very short period of time. And this is your R. We're talking about resources here in the self-funding conversation, right? So I am going to go to our quick quote calculator, and I'm going to run an age nearest 55-year-old couple. And yes, we can share this calculator with you. Yes, we're getting more product specific on a following session a little later. I think it's in early February, actually. But I'm just going to run a very simple long-term care plan. And yes, you can run a quote this fast in about 15 seconds. It is super easy to do. I love this calculator. Simple plan, $150 a day, 3-year benefit period, 3% compound, and our shared benefit amount, which is a third pool of money. We will talk very much about these specifics in our next session, I promise. So this couple, it's about $4,800 a year. This has inflation on it. So by the time this 55-year-old couple is 85, that's about a $1.2 million policy when you look at the total benefits. Well, you told me you could self-fund. Well, remember, that plan was $47.83 a year. And I like to do this. I like to Google these things and pull these things up in front of the client because it's real, and I'm doing it in front of them, and I'm doing it with them. So, hey, what if you took that premium and you invested it? Let's add another $47.83 every year, because you told me you were going to self-fund, right? Let's give you 30 years to get you to 85, and let's guarantee 5% on your money every year for 30 years, which we all know isn't going to happen. You have made $338,000 before you pay off the tax man and the investment fees. So what do you really have here? About $250, something like that. What was the value of your long-term care plan? $1.2 million versus this less taxes and investment fees, which would be around $260 or something. So, Mr. Client, remember, I promised you I could help you self-insure better and longer than you could do it on your own. And we just ran a live example of that together. And I think this product can be a vehicle, and this is where you transition from your R to your T. You're transferring, right? This product can be a vehicle to help you not have to completely deconstruct your financial plan that you spent a lifetime building. And it will protect your family emotionally and physically so they can continue to care about you rather than care for you. They can manage your care. So are you comfortable with the possibility of your life's work, building what you have, being completely deconstructed at a rate of $15,000 or $20,000 a month in the future? Or we can talk about this plan being a vehicle to remove that risk from your portfolio, transfer it to an insurance company, and receive tax-free dollars out of a policy to fund your care instead. Now, bottom of your slide, that's when you begin designing a plan together to mitigate those consequences. Okay. And we'll talk much more about that plan. We will get product specific. We'll talk about NGL. We'll talk about all the great features in our product and how you can design that plan. But at this stage, during today's conversation, I wanted to really take this half hour or 40 minutes and give you those talking points and frame the conversation and hopefully create a foundation for you where you can successfully make these transitions with your clients when you're talking to them about other products. So I just want to thank you very much for that time. I look forward to our next session together. I hope you found this valuable. And Tyler, I'm sure there are a couple questions that had come up. So I will stop the screen share here, and I welcome those questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lawrence. That was awesome. That was a lot of good information. And again, someone did ask, this session will be recorded. Give me some time for our marketing team to put it together. But yeah, it's a lot of information. It's good to review back over it and look over it again and again and again. And if you implement this into your beginning strategy, bring up the long-term care plan, you'll have much more success. That's a great outline. Thank you for that. But any general questions we have at the moment, we would be happy to answer. If folks could just press the raise your hand button, I believe that's Zoom always trips me up, but there is a way to raise your hand. If you click more on the bottom of Zoom and hit raise hand, please do that, and I'll allow you to speak so we're not just talking over each other. And if anyone has any questions they'd like us to answer. and give a couple minutes for that.
Absolutely. And in the meantime, again, I just want to thank you all for taking some time. I truly appreciate it. And, we want to truly be a carrier partner, not just for Tyler, but also for each and every one of you. We want to do all we can to earn your business and show you best in class service, not just a great product with great pricing, which is why we really took today to just focus on the conversation rather than just tell you about how great we are. We want to truly be able to help you in the business, and we know we'll be able to earn it once you have the client's interest on the table. So really appreciate your time, everybody.
It looks like we got no questions sticking out right now. But yes, our next session with Lawrence and I, and everyone mark this down your calendars, and I'll try to get with each and every one of you before then, is going to be February 2nd. And like Lawrence said, that one is going to dive more into his company, the carrier's program that I stand behind. The essential LTC traditional plan. And we're going to go into that February 2nd at 11 a.m. Eastern time. That's going to be 10 a.m. Central time for him, because I know we're all over the place. So again, I'll try to get with each and every one of you so we can take the next step in this journey of getting long-term care sales and business into your agency. Other than that, yeah, again, it will be recorded. I'll try to get the recording out to those who attended within a week or so when the marketing's all set with it. And thanks, Lawrence, and we'll see you next time here.
Hey, thank you so much, Tyler, for setting this up, and thank you again, everyone, for your time. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
All right, goodbye, everyone. Have a great day.